When you hear the name Genghis Khan, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's brutal conquest, right? Mountains of skulls. But there's this other side to him, a side that's just as real. He was also a visionary who built the largest land empire in history, connecting East and West in ways no one had ever dreamed of. So today, we're going to unpack the two faces of Genghis Khan, the terrible and the triumphant.
So let's just jump right into the big question, the one that historians still argue about. Was this guy a butcher or a builder? Was he a mass murderer or the father of a kind of medieval globalization? The wild thing is the evidence. It points overwhelmingly to both. And that's exactly what makes his story so absolutely fascinating.
I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this contrast. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around. On one side, you have destruction that is just staggering. We're talking 5 to 10% of the entire world's population gone. But then, this same man creates the largest free trade zone the world had ever seen. He pioneers concepts like religious freedom, centuries ahead of his time. It's this mind-bending duality we're going to explore.
To really get who this guy was, you have to understand the world that made him. Because before he was the great Genghis Khan, he was just a kid named Temujin. And he was born into a world that was, to put it lightly, a complete and utter mess. So, try to picture 12th century Mongolia. It isn't a country, it's just chaos. A bunch of nomadic tribes constantly at war, stuck in these endless cycles of revenge and kidnapping. There are no cities, no written language, no laws to speak of. It was what historians call a low-trust society, where your neighbor might steal your horse or your wife at any moment. This was easily one of the poorest, most backward places on Earth. And here's the thing, Temujin wasn't just from this world. He was at the absolute rock bottom of it. After his father was murdered, his own clan kicked his family out to die. He became an outcast, he was enslaved, and at one point things were so bad he was wearing clothes literally stitched together from the skins of field mice. This kind of brutal childhood, it didn't just make him tough, it forged a will of iron and a burning desire to bring order to the chaos that nearly killed him.
And that all started with his army. See, Temujin didn't just build a band of warriors, he created a revolutionary military machine, something the world had never ever seen. He basically threw out all the old rules and built his force on two incredibly powerful ideas: unbelievable skill and absolute paralyzing terror.
And this tactic? This shows you their genius. The feigned retreat was their signature move. I mean, it looks simple written down, but imagine the discipline it takes. You have to get an entire unit to fake a total panicked rout, screaming, dropping things, running for their lives, to bait the enemy into a sloppy chase. Then, on a dime, they turn, reform, and with other hidden forces, just completely swallow their pursuers. It worked almost every single time, because nobody else was disciplined enough to pull it off.
This story tells you everything you need to know about how he built his army. During a battle, a guy who would later be nicknamed Jebe, the Arrow, shoots Genghis Khan's horse right out from under him. After the battle, Khan gathers everyone and demands to know who fired that shot. Jebe stands up, looks him in the eye and says, "I did." Now, instead of executing him on the spot, Khan is so blown away by his guts and his skill that he recruits him. Jebe becomes one of his greatest, most loyal generals. Think about how radical that is. Your skill matters more than who you used to fight for.
Yeah, and these weren't just farmers handed a spear. The Mongol army was made up of men who were practically born on horseback. The average soldier could ride for days on end, even sleeping in the saddle. Their bows had a draw weight of around 160 pounds, way more powerful than the famous English longbow, and they could fire them with deadly accuracy while riding at a full gallop. These guys weren't just soldiers, they were the most elite cavalry in the history of the world.
But maybe their most powerful weapon was just pure fear. And this wasn't random cruelty, it was cold, calculated psychological warfare. If a city resisted them, the Mongols would slaughter everyone and then pile their bones into these giant, gleaming white mountains. So when messengers from the next city over came to negotiate, the first thing they'd see on the horizon was this horrifying monument. The message couldn't be clearer: surrender now, or you're the next layer on the mountain.
Okay, so once the conquering was done, a different side of Genghis Khan came out. The warlord became the lawgiver. He knew that you couldn't hold a massive empire together with fear alone. You needed a system. You needed rules that applied to everyone, something to replace the endless tribal feuds he grew up with.
And that system was the Yasa. This was a secret, written code of laws that he created. Now, just writing it down was a huge deal for the Mongols, and it covered everything: military rules, property rights, how you should behave. The Yasa wasn't just a list of do's and don'ts. It was basically the constitution for this new Mongol world.
And what's so wild about the Yasa is how it mixed the super harsh with the shockingly modern. I mean, on the one hand, you steal something, death penalty. You're an adulterer, death penalty. But on the other hand, it demanded total religious freedom for everybody. It protected merchants, got rid of the old noble families, and even created tax breaks for priests, doctors, and scholars. This was a pragmatic code designed for one thing: to make a massive, diverse empire actually work.
So what's the big takeaway here? It was a revolution. The Yasa, along with his army, completely smashed the old system of birthright. All of a sudden, it didn't matter who your dad was. All that mattered was how skilled you were and how loyal you were. He basically tore down the old aristocracy and built a new government based purely on merit.
Which brings us right back to that central paradox. You see, creating this orderly, merit-based, and surprisingly tolerant empire came at a cost that is almost impossible to imagine. For the people who lived inside its borders, it ushered in an era of peace and trade known as the Pax Mongolica, the Mongolic peace. But for anyone who stood in its way, well, it brought total annihilation.
This slide just lays that contradiction bare. The price of peace was unbelievable. The entire Xia culture was just erased. The population of Puria was decimated. But the fruits of that conquest were just as massive. For the first time, things like gunpowder, the compass, and paper money could travel safely from China all the way to Europe. The Silk Road was so safe, they said a young woman could walk from one end of the empire to the other with a pot of gold on her head and never be bothered.
Just let these numbers sink in for a second. This is based on census data, before and after the Mongols arrived. We're not talking about a small dip. The population of China was cut in half. And Persia lost a staggering 90% of its people. This wasn't just war. This was a demographic catastrophe on a scale that's hard for us to even comprehend today. This was the cost of building the Mongol Empire.
And in the end, the unified world that Genghis Khan had built with such brutality couldn't outlive the very rivalries he had worked so hard to crush. After his grandson, Mongol Khan, died in 1259, there was no clear successor. His other grandsons immediately started fighting each other, tearing the empire apart in a series of brutal civil wars.
And just like that, within a few decades, the dream was over. The empire had shattered into 4 separate kingdoms, which were often at war with each other. And while each one carried a piece of the Mongol legacy forward, that grand, terrifying vision of one world under one Khan was gone for good.
So we end right where we started, with a really difficult question. Is it possible that his brutal conquests, by smashing old empires and creating this huge network for trade and ideas, actually accidentally paved the way for the modern world? By connecting East and West, did he light the fuse that led to the Renaissance in Europe? It's a deeply uncomfortable thought, isn't it? That maybe, just maybe, the interconnected world we all live in today has its roots in the bloody conquests of the most terrifying and the most triumphant ruler in history.